Hello, everyone. I want to start with a question. How many times has the government called you to tell you that you are entitled to more money? For most people, the answer is probably never. And that is exactly why I wanted to make this video. Because one of the biggest misconceptions I see among retirees is the belief that if a benefit exists, someone will notify them. If additional money is available, surely a letter will arrive. If there is a better option, surely Social Security will point it out. If a program applies to you, surely someone will explain it. Unfortunately, that is not always how the system works. In fact, from everything I've seen over the years, some of the largest amounts of unclaimed money are not lost because people were denied. They are lost because people never knew to ask, and that distinction matters. There is a big difference between being ineligible for something and never applying for something. One means you do not qualify. The other means you may have qualified all along. I think this happens because many people view Social Security as a completely automatic system. You work, you pay taxes, you retire. The government calculates everything, and the right amount simply appears. That sounds reasonable. But reality is often more complicated. The system contains dozens of rules, exceptions, elections, appeals, and benefit categories. Some of them have existed for years. Some have changed recently. Some require applications. Some require reviews. And some only become relevant after a major life event. Marriage, widowhood, retirement, a change in income, a pension adjustment, a move into Medicare. What surprises me is how often people discover years later that they had options they never knew existed. Sometimes those options involve hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands, and sometimes the difference lasts for the rest of their lives. The first area where I see this happen frequently involves married couples. Many people assume that when one spouse files for Social Security, every possible benefit is automatically evaluated. That sounds logical. But there is a difference between assumptions and procedures. The system knows what records exist. That does not always mean someone has reviewed every possible strategy available to a couple. This is especially important when there is a large gap between what two spouses earned during their careers. One spouse may have worked longer. One may have earned substantially more. One may have spent years outside the workforce raising children or caring for family members. Those differences matter, and when people do not understand how benefits interact, they sometimes leave money behind without realizing it. The second area where confusion becomes even more expensive involves widowhood. I have spoken with people who believed that after losing a spouse, there was only one Social Security path available to them. They thought the system automatically selected the best option, and that was the end of the conversation. But survivor benefits are often more complicated than people realize. The timing matters, your age matters, your own work record matters, your spouse's record matters, and sometimes there are choices that affect lifetime income in ways that are not obvious at first glance. What I find interesting is that many people spend months researching investments while spending almost no time understanding survivor benefits. Yet for some households, survivor decisions can have a greater financial impact than years of investment returns. That is why I always encourage people to ask questions after major life changes. Not because there is always additional money waiting, but because there sometimes is. And the only way to know is to verify. Another issue that deserves more attention involves Medicare costs. Many retirees focus on their Social Security check. They pay far less attention to what is being deducted from that check. In my opinion, that is a mistake. Because sometimes the amount leaving your benefit matters just as much as the amount coming in. What many people do not realize is that Medicare premiums can be influenced by past income, not current income. Past income. That distinction creates situations where someone may be paying charges based on a financial picture that no longer exists. Maybe they retired. Maybe they lost income. Maybe they experienced a major life change. Yet deductions continue based on older information. What fascinates me about this issue is how many people assume those charges are permanent. They see the deduction. They accept it. They move on, never questioning whether a review process exists, never asking whether circumstances have changed enough to justify an adjustment. And that brings me to something I think is one of the most important financial lessons for retirees. Never assume that a deduction is automatically correct forever. Systems use information. Information changes, life changes. Sometimes those changes matter. The next area involves public service workers, teachers, police officers, firefighters, government employees, people who spent years serving their communities. Many of them built careers under rules that looked very different from today's rules. And when laws change, adjustments do not always happen overnight. Records need updating. Cases need reviewing. Payments need processing. What interests me here is how many people stop checking once they retire. They assume everything has already been settled. But retirement does not freeze the system. Legislation changes. Court decisions happen. Administrative updates occur. And sometimes those changes affect benefits that were calculated years ago. That is why I think periodic reviews are healthy. Not because something is always wrong, but because things do change. And the people who know that often discover opportunities that others miss. Finally, I want to talk about something much smaller on paper, but surprisingly significant in real life. Benefits that expire because people never use them. This may be one of the most frustrating examples of all, not because the money is unavailable, but because it is available. It is already allocated, already approved, already sitting there. And yet millions of dollars go unused every year. Why? Because people do not know it exists. Or they received information they did not understand. Or they assumed the benefit was insignificant and never looked into it. What I find fascinating is that people are often extremely careful about wasting money, yet many never check whether they are actually receiving everything included in the plans they already pay for. It is a reminder that financial awareness is not only about earning more, sometimes it is about fully using what you already have. And that brings me to the bigger lesson. The goal of this video is not to convince you that hidden money is everywhere. The goal is not to promise that everyone watching will suddenly receive thousands of dollars. That would not be realistic. The goal is much simpler. Do not assume. Do not assume Social Security automatically selected the best option. Do not assume Medicare deductions cannot be reviewed. Do not assume old calculations never change. Do not assume every benefit appears automatically. And most importantly, do not assume that no action is required simply because nobody contacted you. Because one thing I have learned over the years is that the people who receive the most from the system are often not the people who know the most rules. They are the people who ask the most questions. They verify. They review. They follow up. They challenge assumptions. And occasionally, those questions lead to money they never knew they had. At the end of the day, Social Security and Medicare are not just government programs. They are systems built on decades of work, taxes, and contributions. You earn the right to understand those systems. You earn the right to ask questions. And if there is a benefit available to you, you deserve to know about it before the opportunity quietly disappears. Because sometimes the difference between receiving a benefit and never receiving it has nothing to do with eligibility. It comes down to one simple thing: knowing that it exists in the first place.